Hi, and welcome to Life of Grace. And we just celebrated Easter, Resurrection Sunday, big day for Christianity, and I remember when I was growing up, we used to celebrate Easter by having a big meal at the house. We didn't go to church. Our family we weren't churchgoers, but we still had the big Easter meal. And what we would do is Mom would cook all day long. She would make this, ham, mashed potatoes, coleslaw, just all this kind of Easter type food. And then we would sit down and consume it in about 3 minutes, And then we would get up from the table, and the men would walk into the family room, lay down on the couch like big land manatees, begin to snore and kind of watch TV and doze off and on. And the women would get up and go into the kitchen and start doing the dishes. And then we'd be in for an afternoon of dish doing and kitchen cleaning up while the men were in there enjoying the television. And my mom used to come out and have a look at this picture, and she'd say to herself, when I die, I'm coming back as a man. And we all used to laugh because, why should they go lay on the couch and we're in there? We cooked the whole thing. What are we doing having to clean it up? But that was the way my mom thought of it. And she used to say to me, you know what, Nance? It's a man's world. And I thought, what is that supposed to mean? She's talking about how men seem to have all the advantages, and it's a man's world. And, I don't believe that. I think it's a man and woman's world equally. And I really do think it's like that. But my mama was right about the fact that it was a man's world back in the Middle East in the time of Jesus with the first Easter when he resurrected from the grave. It was definitely a man's world. And you say, well, why am I bringing that up? Well, actually, the fact that women were not thought of as very high citizens back then. They were kind of second-class citizens. They didn't hold a whole lot of clout back then in the Middle East, there in around Jesus' time. And they were so thought of as so lowly that they weren't even allowed to testify in court. So the fact that they were so lowly thought of tells us that the gospel writers were writing the truth. Well, why is that, you say? Well, because all four of them, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, mention the fact that it was a group of women who were the ones who discovered the empty tomb and saw the angels hanging around and were the first ones to see Jesus resurrected in the garden. And if you were Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, and you were going to put together some kind of legend or some kind of story and it really wasn't true, back then you would not have a bunch of women finding something as significant as the resurrection of Jesus Christ. You'd say that it was Peter or James or somebody else or one of the Roman guards or a well thought of Jewish man. You wouldn't say that it was a bunch of women who were the first ones to discover something as important as that. But the fact is that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote the truth. They didn't write legend. They were not making this up. It was absolutely true. In fact, it was so true that they talk about the fact that the Apostle Paul talks about the fact that there were all kinds of people who saw the resurrected Jesus walking around. They ate with him. Even more than 500 people saw the resurrected Jesus. And Jesus' half-brother, James, was so convinced that his brother was the Lord and Savior. You can imagine growing up, he probably thought that his crazy lunatic brother, who claimed to be God, was just a big embarrassment. But then once he rose from the dead and half-brother saw his Lord and Savior and brother, Jesus Christ, he knew he was the Messiah. And he became such a believer that he was martyred. He was stoned to death because he believed it so strongly. And when I was growing up, we didn't go to church. We weren't even Creasters, people who go to church on Christmas and Easter. But when I met Jesus face to face, actually inside, spirit to spirit, it changed me too. And I, too, like his brother James, was completely convinced that Jesus was resurrected from the dead. Jesus definitely suffered a fatal death. The tomb was definitely found empty, and there were definitely people who saw him walking around. It was written by historians, and lives were definitely transformed by this whole idea about the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So maybe if Jesus really did rise from the dead and really is the Lord and Savior, then what he said that he could do for you in helping you is really true as well. So all you have to do is just say yes to the Lord, invite him into your life, come to know him personally. You know, you're saved through relationship with Jesus Christ. He really did rise from the dead. I'm Nancy King saying, grace to you from Grace United Methodist Church in Venice.